I lost a lot of weight. I got to the point where I felt physically weak in a way that I had never felt physically weak before. It was something that was really humbling for me, where I didn't want people to see me like that. My name is Mark. I am 39 years old now. I was diagnosed at the age of 35 with colon cancer, and I currently live in a suburb outside of Salt Lake City, Utah. My cancer journey, in just a couple of sentences, I would sum up with surprising, humbling experience where I learned the importance of knowing your body, knowing what your body can handle, and surrounding yourself with people that you can trust and that will be there for you no matter what. I had this really bad cramp. And when I say cramp, it's not like the cramp you get when you're running and you got a stitch in your side and you got to stop for a minute. This cramp, I couldn't even get out of bed. It happened again in October 2020. Not as bad, but still the same type of pain. And then finally in December 2020, I had it happen again. This was the third time in 4 months that I'd had a similar situation. And this time it actually started to focalize on my right side. And that led me to think, I've got to go to the ER. In my head, I was rationalizing that it was probably appendicitis. I've had a couple people in my family have it, and I don't want to mess with that. So I went to the ER. I went through all the testing and everything, and they said they didn't see anything. They ruled out appendicitis pretty early, which honestly, I knew it probably wasn't, since when I got there, the pain was easing, which that's not what appendicitis is. It just gets worse and worse and worse. But the thing is, while I was there, I knew something wasn't right. Something did not feel right. I knew there was something that needed to be chased down. So fast forward, I went to my recommended follow-up with my gastroenterologist, and he was really great. We talked with him for, we were there for like an hour. And one thing that came up in the ER was that the doctor, towards the end of the visit, said, "Do you have any history of cancer?" And I, at the time, was like, no, why are we talking about cancer? This is something like I have Crohn's or colitis or something like that. And so I mentioned that to my gastroenterologist, and he goes, okay. He asked me a few more questions. He showed me there's a poop chart. If you didn't know that, there's a chart with different photos that they ask you to look at to see what your stool looks like. So that was a new thing I learned along this journey as well, which, kind of one of those maybe morbid humor things that you learn to navigate these kind of journeys with, is that sense of humor. He said, based on what you're telling me, based on your health, your age, I don't think it's going to be anything cancer related. Well, he ended up still recommending a colonoscopy just to make sure. The protocol was that I would go to the colonoscopy, get done. As I wake up, somebody would be there to pick me up. They just roll me out to the curb. And what ended up happening was I woke up and they came to check on me and said, "Your wife is on the way, and the doctor will meet with you both when she gets here." I was still coming out of sedation. I didn't put two and two together what that meant. So she got there. My gastroenterologist came in, and he looked like he had seen a ghost. You can imagine, because just a week and a half or so before that, he had told me he didn't think it was going to be cancer related. And he said to me, "We found a mass, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be cancer." And I said to him, "Okay, what do we do next?" He goes, I just want to make sure you heard me. I'm pretty sure that you have cancer." And I told him, "Yeah, I heard you. I just need to know what the next step is." And that really is how not only myself, but my wife and the people who supported me through this journey looked at this whole experience as, okay, what's the next step? What do we have to do to move this forward? he was very careful to not say it for sure is cancer. He knew we needed to get a biopsy done. He was he kept dancing around it, right? Like he has to wait for the slam dunk of the biopsy to tell us it's cancer. So I did have the biopsy taken. They took that while I was during the colonoscopy, and it did come back positive for a cancer diagnosis. My tumor was on the right side, which explains why the cramping I was having localized on that right side. And the only symptom I ever had was the cramping. With colon cancer, a lot of times there's blood in your stool, and that's a really good indicator that something's wrong. For me, it turns out my tumor was bleeding, but it was so far up the system that by the time it got to the exit, there was no visible sign of blood being in stool. So just another nefarious part of this disease is that you could have something happening that should tell you have something wrong, but it wasn't manifesting. So yeah, I got recommended surgery. During that, they took a bunch of lymph nodes out, as well as 18 to 24 inches of my small and large intestine. Since it was right on the ileocecal valve is where my tumor was. So they had to take some of both. They got good margins. They got 27 lymph nodes. And we waited, felt like forever, but it was probably about a week to hear back on if it had spread to my lymph nodes or not. Again, one of those things where, a theme of my story is trusting your instinct. I knew in the ER something wasn't right. I knew when we were waiting for the lymph nodes, I just knew it was going to be in the lymph nodes. I don't know why. I'm a positive person. I consider myself a fairly optimistic person, but I knew that it was going to be in the lymph nodes, and I was going to have to end up making a decision on what to do from a chemotherapy perspective. They ran my tumor up against every genetic test they have. Nothing came back. Lynch syndrome is really common with colon cancer if it's going to be genetic. It was nothing. And my geneticist was really good. She told me, just because it's not showing up today as something genetic doesn't mean that in the future it might not. As we discover more of the genome that we can test, you may run this again in 10, 20 years and find, oh, hey, it actually is genetic. After surgery, there were some decisions to be made. My oncologist gave me the choice of, how do you want to approach this? Do you want to take your chances with not doing chemo? And here's what that looks like. And chances were like, I can't remember the exact numbers, but it was an okay chance of being cured without doing chemo. Or you can do chemo and your chances go to this, which again, I don't remember the specific numbers, but the increase in being cured, that chance went way up. Within that, I did decide I wanted to do chemo. I wanted to make sure to mop up, is kind of the term they use, to mop up anything that was left. I had a choice between two treatments. One was a more traditional, longer term, like a 6-month kind of deal. And the other one was a shorter duration, but more intense. My oncologist said, it's up to you, but I'm going to make a recommendation that you're young, you're healthy. I think you can handle the shorter, more aggressive treatment. And in my head, all I heard was young, healthy, fit, you can do this. And I don't think I know at that point that I didn't fully register just how difficult the treatment was going to be. And then we started. It was 4 infusions. Actually, it ended up being 6 infusions because I had 2 extra infusions of iron just to make up for my anemia. But 4 infusions of chemo, and the cycles looked like I'd get my infusion, and then I would take oral chemo for 2 weeks, twice a day, and then have a week off, and then repeat. I think it was 4 times. Every side effect usually has a countermeasure you can take to offset it and make it more manageable. Well, in my case, every countermeasure that was available was offset by a different side effect. So there was like nothing I could do. Like the hydration element, they're like, oh, you can, popsicles is a really popular thing. Well, the side effect of my infusion chemo was cold sensitivity, which made it so your throat and your body became extremely sensitive to any kind of cold exposure. So that was off the table. That was probably the worst side effect, was that cold sensitivity, because it hit within minutes of starting the treatment or starting the infusion. And it felt like, for me, it felt like when like that hook and loop connection, like Velcro stuff, when you peel it apart, that sound it makes and that visceral like disconnection, that's what it felt like when cold liquid would enter my mouth and throat. Other people describe it as like glass shards. It's not pleasant. So that made it so I got dehydrated a lot because, another weird one, the weirdest one I had was I could smell water, which was the strangest thing to be able to detect the smell of water. And that was nauseating. So I had to go in not only for my infusion, but I went back to the infusion center multiple times to get hydration, like a bag of liquid hydration, right? And the other side effect that really crushed me was the oral chemo. Within minutes of taking that, I would be completely sapped of any energy. Just to the point where, as passionate as I feel about keeping your body movement going, like whether that's walking, running, weightlifting, whatever it is, some days during my treatment, the best I could do is walk from my bed to the chair to the couch and then back to bed later that day. And I just had to take it where I could get it, the physical movement. Other than that, it was like, I did have some neuropathy. I still have some neuropathy that's left in my big toes, which is kind of annoying, but it's, all things considered, with where I'm at now, the side effects were temporary, at least at this point. Maybe something will come up down the road. But for now, the only lasting side effect I have physically is the neuropathy in my toes. The worst moment of this whole experience, besides finding out that, that those initial words like, okay, it looks like you have cancer. Besides that, was really, I lost a lot of weight. I got to the point where I felt physically weak in a way that I had never felt physically weak before. It was something that was really humbling for me, where I didn't want people to see me like that. I didn't want people to see me not able to, carry the bag of groceries in or whatever it is, right? I didn't want people to see me that way. It was hard for me to know my kids were seeing me like that. And they were, at the time, they were younger. They were, 8 and 5. But, having everybody see like me, who I'm supposed to be strong and stuff and be the dad and like, in the husband and caretaker role, all that, to be seen weak was really, really difficult for me. One thing I didn't see coming was being forced to learn to accept help. That was something that I knew we were probably going to have, people step in and help keep things moving forward. But to the degree which I needed help, and not just help like with meals or getting groceries or whatever it was, but help from the perspective of talking through what I was going through. Some of the best things that happened through my chemo treatment time were days when I would be at my lowest points. My wife would go out of her way to come home from work. She does hair for a living, and so she kind of has her schedule. She can move clients around, and her clients were really great about understanding everything. But she came home multiple times throughout my treatment to just be with me, and like just having another person there to help pass the time. Because there was times when it was, I'm not going to get through today. It's, I have to get through the next 60 seconds. I have to get through the next hour. Like it would get down to that level. I had one of my sisters come over and spent good time with me. notably my mom, right towards the end of my treatment, when I felt like I was not able to keep going. She came over and kind of gave me a like, whip me into shape talk, like, you can do this, you have to do this, like all that, which was really great. And don't get me wrong, there was a lot of other people that came over and did awesome things, but those are some that really stick out to me. And again, just to the point of it being surprising how much help I needed. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do with my hands. I'm smiling, I promise. I have been considered no evidence of disease since finishing chemo, I think is when they kind of started talking about that. So that was spring of 2021. The clock for time since begins after your surgery. So I just passed my 4-year threshold of my surgery. And for the surveillance part of the treatment I was in, I had to get scans twice a year. I was getting blood work every 3 months. There's a specific tumor marker for colon cancer they can detect in your blood. It's not foolproof, but it's another indicator they can use. And so I was getting blood work done every 3 months. And I had 1 or 2 colonoscopies after my surgery to look for, just to visibly inspect things, right? And where I'm at now, at 5 years, they consider you cured. It's a word that I have a lot of mixed feelings about. But that's the way they talk about it, is after 5 years, they consider you cured. For this year, I have 1 more scan to do in 2025. I have a colonoscopy this year to do. And assuming those things come back clean, I am out of surveillance and back to whatever normal looks like. And so it's weird to think about that part of it, because I like analogies a lot. And the one I think of with this is I've been riding my bike with training wheels with my oncology team, taking care of me, watching me really closely. And now they're about to take the training wheels off and send me out, to ride my bike down the street by myself. And as exciting as that is, I mean, I remember learning to ride my bike without training wheels. It was awesome. The freedom that came with was incredible. But there's a heavy responsibility there too. So it goes, the responsibility of watching out for me really moves from a care team to fully on me, and that's kind of a heavy burden, but it's also really, really exciting to be able to take that next step forward. For a long time, probably about 2 years after treatment, I had a really hard time looking ahead, because in my mind, I was going to the dark places of like, I'm going to have a recurrence. I'm not going to get to see my kids graduate high school even. It just was tough to look far ahead. Where I'm at now is a lot better. And it took a little bit of therapy. I'll be totally honest with that experience for me. I had a therapist that was good, but as far as I know, and maybe he just didn't reveal this to me, but he wasn't a cancer patient. And that is something I think is important if you need a therapist and you're a cancer patient, to try to find someone who can relate directly with your experience. But he gave me some good tools. So I'm definitely a proponent of, if you're feeling like you need some help, do not bottle it up. I tried that. I tried to just move on like nothing happened, especially from a work perspective. I wanted to just get back to work and move forward. I didn't want to have anybody think that I was playing the cancer card, so to speak, and like milking that. So that approach didn't work. I had to talk through it. I had to figure out how to live and incorporate this new normal of existing as a cancer survivor, cancer patient, however you want to put it. And a big part of that for me has become doing things like this, sharing my story. My sister has a syndrome that yields symptoms in your abdomen, your abdominal area. And after my diagnosis, they recommended all my siblings get a colonoscopy just to make sure. And they actually found in that one sister precancerous polyps as well. And so for me, that's where that would put the, to use another sports analogy, that was the slam dunk for me to be like, I'm going to share my story. I'm going to talk about this. And so my new normal has been a lot of advocacy. I'm not like a bodybuilder or anything like that level, but the way my oncologist put it from a diet perspective was, if you go to a birthday party, have a piece of cake, but don't eat cake every day, and things like that. And that's really, the new normal, and just taking advantage of the time I have, where before maybe I would have like scrolled my phone instead of like getting up and going for a walk. Now I will take that time to get up and go for a walk. Find the opportunity to, play with my kids maybe a little bit more. Nobody has time promised, but when you're a cancer patient, that time feels less promised. And that's a weird thing to talk through because, a lot of people who haven't been through cancer don't have that lens to look through, where sure, anyone could walk out the front door and get hit by a bus, but when you've gone through a cancer diagnosis, it feels like that chance is higher for whatever reason, at least for me. There's that term survivor's guilt. I don't know if I have survivor's guilt, but I do wonder sometimes. One of the most notable cases of colon cancer taking someone is Chadwick Boseman. He played Black Panther. Here's a man who had everything at his disposal, money, resources, you name it. And not only did he battle through the end with grace, like nobody knew he was sick except for the people closest to him. But he did that, but he didn't make it. And yet here I am, just some guy in Utah. And so far I've made it through this, who knows what tomorrow brings, but so far here I am. And the message of hope, I guess, is that surviving isn't the end goal. It's how you work through all the steps to get there, and take it one day at a time. Surround yourself with people that are going to be positive. One thing I've learned is you got to keep your stress levels down. Like, I don't watch horror movies or anything like that anymore. Just those stress levels just aren't worth it. Watch uplifting things, surround yourself with uplifting material, things you love, and get outside and enjoy nature. And I think those things really can help you navigate, even if you are in a situation where the goal of your treatment isn't survival, it's extension of your life. Find the good days in that and use those as your motivation to move forward.